Have you ever noticed how some people become more powerful, more centered, the exact moment everyone else starts falling apart? While the rest of the world is freaking out, chasing validation, explaining themselves, overreacting like they're addicted to drama, these people stay silent, unmoved. And somehow, the world starts orbiting around them like they're some kind of human magnet. It's not magic. It's what happens when you weaponize a real spiritual awakening. See, most people think that being spiritually awakened means becoming softer, more passive, some kind of enlightened pushover who lets the world walk all over them with a smile. But that's not awakening. That's conditioning dressed in spiritual robes. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, saw it completely differently. He didn't think awakening made you soft. He believed it made you untouchable. Let's get real about what actually happens when you awaken the right way. While the world is having emotional meltdowns, you become strategically detached. While others are out here begging for approval like it's oxygen, you stop needing it entirely. And the moment that happens, everyone starts competing for your energy. You stop defending yourself. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. Instead, you start moving from a place of quiet, unshakable inner authority. And Jung had a word for this state: individuation. It's not just about becoming self-aware, it's about becoming whole, no longer ruled by the chaos of others, no longer hooked by manipulation or emotional guilt trips. And that wholeness, it makes you the most powerful person in the room without ever needing to raise your voice. Think about it. Who actually holds influence? The one constantly trying to convince everyone they're right? Or the one so centered they don't need to convince anyone of anything? The one begging for respect? Or the one whose silence commands it? Exactly. This isn't some fantasy. This is what real inner authority looks like. Jung understood that awakening doesn't make you soft. It makes you untouchable. It gives you power that doesn't require struggle, presence that doesn't need performance. If you're tired of being everyone's emotional support system, tired of giving and being left empty, this is the pivot point. Because once you cross that threshold, you stop giving your power away the way you used to. But here's the hard truth. Most people who call themselves spiritual these days, they're not sovereign. They're trained to be doormats. You know the type. The friend who constantly sacrifices for toxic people because we shouldn't judge. The coworker who lets others dump everything on them in the name of compassion. The partner who stays with someone who lies, cheats, and manipulates because love requires sacrifice. They think being spiritual means never saying no, never being angry, never putting themselves first. They've been brainwashed. They're proud of it. They'll smile while they're being disrespected, apologize for setting boundaries, preach about love and light while quietly imploding from emotional exhaustion. They think being everyone's emotional dumpster makes them enlightened. They don't see the cost. Jung saw it clearly. He watched generations of people amputate their power, bury their instincts, repress their truth, all to be liked, to be accepted, to be needed. And what they became wasn't spiritual, it was hollow. 50 years ago, parents commanded respect. Teachers had authority. People earned credibility. Now, we're told that every opinion is valid, even if it's toxic, that setting boundaries is mean, that having standards makes you rigid. So we've created this culture of over-accommodation, of nice but numb people who get quietly crushed under the weight of their own emotional suppression. And Jung, he saw through the performance. Real spiritual people aren't the ones getting walked over. They're the ones you don't even try to disrespect. Now, take a moment and look around your life. Who actually has power? Who commands attention? It's not the person sending 37 passive-aggressive texts about energy and boundaries. It's not the one constantly over-explaining themselves to be liked. It's the one who simply says, no, and leaves it at that. They don't answer every call. They don't justify every decision. They charge what they're worth, and they don't apologize for it. These people aren't love and light. They're
They're spiritually integrated, and that makes them magnetic. See, respect doesn't go to the nice ones, it goes to the powerful ones. And here's what Jung discovered that most people don't want to hear. Real spiritual awakening doesn't make you nicer, it makes you scarier. Not in a threatening way, in a you can't manipulate me anymore way, in a your emotional chaos doesn't move me way, in a your drama is not my responsibility way. And that terrifies people who rely on your buttons to get their way. They can't guilt you, they can't control you, they can't make you dance for their approval. And suddenly, they're the ones scrambling because they've never met someone who isn't hungry for validation. That's what Jung called individuation. But let's be clear, this isn't some polite concept. This is psychological immunity. You stop being baited by other people's projections. You stop leaking energy into battles that don't belong to you. And you start standing in your full, integrated, no apologies truth. Look back at history. The most powerful leaders weren't the loudest. They weren't the most aggressive. They weren't begging for attention. They were calm, centered, and somehow the world moved around them. Marcus Aurelius didn't need brutality. He ruled through inner mastery. Gandhi didn't fight with fists. He broke an empire through stillness. They weren't passive. They were untouchable. And this is what Jung was obsessed with, what separates those who truly awaken from those who stay stuck in performance. He spent decades studying this. And here's what he found. People who integrate their awakening become leaders, magnetic, centered, emotionally intelligent. But the people who use spirituality to avoid responsibility, they stay victims, forever blaming, forever searching, forever drained. The difference isn't in how much they meditate, it's in how they relate to power. The successful ones own their insight. They use it. They don't just talk about it. The others hide behind it. They use compassion as a shield. They use love and light to avoid hard conversations. They wear spirituality like a mask, but underneath, they're still running from their own darkness. Jung noticed something huge about power. The less you need an outcome, the more you tend to influence it. It's psychological gravity. Who wins in negotiation? The person desperate to close the deal, or the one willing to walk away? Who gets respected in a relationship? The person who begs for love, or the one who's already whole? Who gets promoted faster? The employee obsessed with being liked, or the one quietly mastering their craft without attachment? That's the difference between chasing and attracting, between needing and knowing. When you stop needing, you start leading. And when you stop fearing loss, you become magnetic to gain. So when you walk into a room, you're no longer the one begging to be seen. You're the one people feel. Not because you're flashy, but because your calmness changes the energy. And when people feel your calmness, they listen. They follow. They rise. Because real power doesn't dominate. It orients the room. That's individuation. That's sovereignty. That's what Carl Jung meant when he talked about awakening, not as an escape from life, but as a mastery of it.
So let's take this deeper. If you want to tap into the kind of inner authority that commands respect without demanding it, if you want to move through life untouchable, not because you're hard, but because you're whole, you have to go to the one place most people never dare to look: your shadow. See, most people think the path to spiritual power is all about love, light, good vibes, and positive thinking. That's cute, but Jung would roll his eyes. He knew the truth. Your greatest power is buried in the exact parts of yourself you've been taught to hide. Not in your kindness, not in your light, not in your polished public persona, but in your rage, in your pride, in your manipulation, in your selfishness, in your hunger for control. The stuff you swore you didn't have, That's where your power's been hiding this whole time. And here's the uncomfortable part. Every religion, every spiritual system, every feel-good philosophy has been telling you to amputate those pieces. Don't be angry. Don't be selfish. Don't be vengeful. Don't be too much. So you buried it. You shoved it down, smiled through it, called it growth, and thought you were doing the right thing. But those parts, they didn't disappear. They became your shadow. And from there, from the basement of your psyche, they started running the show. Jung said something that changed everything. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Let that sink in. Your unintegrated shadow isn't just dead weight. It's active. It leaks out through your relationships, your reactions, your fears. It makes you passive-aggressive, over-accommodating, controlling in subtle, socially acceptable ways. You say you're not manipulative, but you use guilt to use people into doing what you want. You say you're not arrogant, but you secretly think you're more evolved than the people around you. You say you're not selfish, but you expect others to sacrifice for your comfort, for your needs. You say you're not controlling, but you shut down emotionally when things don't go your way. You're not bad. You're not broken. You're just fragmented. Jung saw this over and over in his patients. The people who tried the hardest to be only good, they ended up being the most dangerous because they didn't even know how manipulative they were being. But the people who owned their darkness, they became luminous because they weren't slaves to it anymore. They weren't pretending to be something they weren't. They could choose when to access their edge and when to put it down. That's what made them powerful. Let me say this clearly. Integration is not about acting out your darkness. It's about owning it so it no longer owns you. It's not about becoming cruel. It's about becoming complete. And you can feel it when someone's done the work. There's a weight to them, a groundedness. You can sense they're not trying to be liked. They're not hiding anything. They're not afraid of confrontation. They've looked their darkness in the eye and said, I see you. I'm not ashamed of you. I'm in charge now. That's magnetic. And more than that, it's healing. Because the moment you integrate your shadow, you stop needing other people to carry it for you. You stop projecting your anger onto toxic people. You stop expecting others to validate your worth because you've finally stopped abandoning it yourself. You stop leaking energy. And if you're feeling exhausted all the time, this is probably why. Let's talk about that. Because so many people walking around today are burnt out, but not from working too hard. They're burnt out from being fake, from wearing masks, from constantly shrinking, sacrificing, suppressing. Ever been the strong one in the group? The dependable one, the one who always shows up, never complains, handles everything. And underneath, you're empty, drained, done. But you keep giving because somewhere along the line, you learned that needing less makes you lovable. You show up like a machine, hold it together for everyone, and the world keeps leaning on you because you trained it to. You wore your silence like armor. You convinced yourself that being low maintenance was a virtue, that being good would protect you. But instead, it turned you into a ghost with good manners. Jung would call this a fracture of the self, because when you suppress too many pieces of who you are just to keep the peace or prove your worth, you don't become more enlightened, you become hollow. And that resentment, it's not just emotional. It's energetic. You help, but secretly you hope someone will ask, "Are you okay?" But they don't, because you trained them not to. And the deeper truth is, this didn't start with your boss or your partner or your friends. It started the moment you believed that love had to be earned.
And what did you use to earn it? Silence, sacrifice, self-betrayal. You kept hoping that being good would finally make you safe, that being needed would mean being loved. But it didn't. And now you're tired. Not just physically, soul tired. But here's the truth you've probably never been told. Real strength is not in giving everything away. It's in knowing where you end and others begin. It's in knowing when to stop bleeding for people who aren't willing to stop cutting. It's in having the courage to say, I'm done carrying what isn't mine. Because the world will never tell you to stop sacrificing. You have to decide that for yourself. And once you do, once you draw that line, something wild happens. People push back. They test you, guilt you, accuse you of changing. Because you did. You stopped being convenient. You stopped shrinking. And for some people, that's terrifying because they depended on your silence to feel comfortable. They fed on your submission and called it love. But here's the twist. The longer you tolerate abuse, emotional, psychological, energetic, the more you start to internalize it. And then you start to reproduce it. Yeah, this part is hard to hear. You're not just the one who got hurt. You've also become the one who hurts, subtly, unconsciously, just like the people who hurt you. You say you're not manipulative, but you use guilt just like your parents did. You say you're not cruel, but you punish with silence just like your ex did. You swore you'd never be like them, but the unhealed parts of you are still playing out their patterns. Not because you're a bad person, because your nervous system is still running on a script it didn't write. This is where most people turn back. They don't want to admit their own shadow. It's easier to blame others than look in the mirror. But Jung's work doesn't let you off that easy. He said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And if you really want to reclaim your power, it starts with brutal honesty. So let's go there. What do you judge the most in others? Manipulation, arrogance, selfishness, control. Now flip it. That's probably the very part of yourself you've disowned. That's your shadow. And until you reclaim it, you'll keep projecting it, rejecting it, and getting controlled by it. But once you integrate it, you become real. Not perfect, real. You become someone who can hold the tension of opposites. You can be fierce and gentle. You can be generous and selfish. You can be kind and unapologetically boundaried. You stop performing spiritual, and you start embodying integrity.
Now that we've talked about reclaiming your shadow, stepping out of people-pleasing, and becoming whole, not just good, let's get to the part that really matters. How do you actually live this every day? Because if we're being honest, most people don't fail at awakening because they didn't learn enough. They fail because they didn't apply what they learned consistently enough to make it real. Carl Jung didn't just give us ideas to admire. He gave us a blueprint to live by. He called it individuation. But let's put it in plain language. It means stop bleeding energy into fake peace, emotional performances, and people who only value what you give them, not who you are. Let's start with step 1. Awareness over amnesia. You can't shift what you won't name. That gut feeling you keep ignoring, that's not paranoia, it's intelligence. That exhaustion you keep normalizing, it's not being strong, it's self-betrayal. That relationship that drains you, it's not complicated, it's harmful. So stop gaslighting yourself. Name what's off. Call the patterns what they are. That was manipulation. That was emotional neglect.
That was me abandoning myself again. Because once you name it, you own it. And what you own, you can change. 2. Boundaries over performance. A boundary is not a wall. It's a promise you make to yourself. I will not abandon myself to make someone else comfortable. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need a monologue or a mood board. You just need one clear sentence. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. If that happens again, I won't stay. Simple, direct, unapologetic. And yeah, people will flinch. Some will push back. Some will leave. Let them. Because boundaries don't push away love. They filter out harm. 3. Integration over image. You want your power back? Stop performing your best self and start integrating your real self. That means all of you. The ambition, the rage, the tenderness, the edge, the awkwardness, the drive to manipulate outcomes. Not to act them all out, but to own that you can. And that awareness gives you the freedom not to. Jung didn't say, be nice. He said, I'd rather be whole than good. That's real spiritual growth. It's not about becoming a better person. It's about becoming a real one. And once you do that, you stop leaking energy. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop explaining your pain to people who benefit from not understanding it. You stop shrinking for applause. You speak when it matters. And when it doesn't, you let silence do the talking. That's energetic containment. That's what makes people feel your power without you needing to perform it. That's how Daniel get it in the lion's den. That's how Gandhi brought an empire to its knees without violence. And that's how you do it. One boundary, one breath, one reclaiming at a time. But here's the catch. Once you start living from this new center, the world is going to test you. Not because it's evil, but because your shift disrupts the patterns others depended on. Your partner will guilt you. You've changed. Your family will push your buttons. You're so cold now. Your friends will try to pull you back into old roles. Just be chill like before. Why? Because you broke the unspoken contract. You stay small, so I don't have to grow. But you're done with that. You've drawn the line. You've said it. I refuse to shrink for connection. And now you're dangerous. Not to others, to systems, to codependent dynamics, to manipulative games that require your silence to survive. This is where you need more than emotion. You need strategy. Jung discovered something critical about people who mastered their spiritual awakening. They weren't the ones who ran away from society. They were the ones who learned how to move through it without being moved by it. Let's talk about how they did it. They practiced conscious participation. Here's what that means. You don't run to the mountains. You don't cut off everyone who annoys you. You don't preach at people who aren't ready. You stay in the room, but with your eyes wide open. And to do that, you need 3 tools Jung saw over and over in his patients who thrived in the real world. 1. The observer self. You watch your own behavior without becoming it. You're in the meeting, but you're not in the drama. You're at the family dinner, but you're not slipping back into the child role. You're listening to someone vent, but you're not taking it on like it's yours to fix. You're playing the role, but you're not lost in the role. That's psychological mastery. 2. Strategic authenticity. You stop confusing honesty with overexposure. You don't reveal your entire life story to your coworker because you're being real. You don't trauma dump on your date because you want to be authentic. You learn discernment. Not everyone gets full access. And that's not fake. That's intelligence. You wouldn't give your house keys to a stranger. So why are you handing your truth to people who haven't earned it? 3. Influence without attachment. This one's huge. You can guide people, plant seeds, offer wisdom, but you do not chase their growth. You don't beg people to wake up. You don't force your path onto them. You don't spiral if they reject your insight. Because here's what Jung saw again and again. The people who mastered their spiritual awakening weren't the ones who ran away from society. They were the ones who learned how to move through it without being moved by it. Now let's land the plane. Here's the final trap you need to avoid, and it's the one Jung warned about the most. It's not the fear of failure, it's the corruption of power. Not the obvious kind, the subtle kind. You awaken, you integrate, you get strong, and suddenly you start to feel above people. You start judging unconsciousness. You start using spiritual language as a flex. You start manipulating others with your awareness. Jung saw it ruin people's lives. They did the work, and then their ego came in through the back door wearing a robe and beads. So here's how you keep your power clean. 1. Power through service, not domination. Use your insight to lift, not to control. Lead by example, not by force. 2. Growth over achievement. Never settle into thinking you've arrived. What worked at one stage of your life may not work in the next. Stay curious. Stay humble. 3. Responsibility without identity. Just because people look up to you doesn't mean you need to be their hero. Just because you're strong doesn't mean you have to carry it all. You can hold space without becoming the space. And that's the secret to sustainable power. You can love fully without losing yourself completely. You can serve deeply without sacrificing your center. You can influence outcomes without being attached to them. And when you live from that place, you don't just change your life. You become a portal for change. You wake others up, not through preaching, but through presence. You remind people of who they could be just by being fully who you are. And this is what Carl Jung gave us. Not just a theory, a transformation map. A way to return to our authentic selves, reclaim our energy, and participate in the world without being ruled by it. So now it's your move. Are you going to go back to shrinking for peace? Or are you ready to hold the line and own your power? Because the world doesn't need more people pretending to be okay. It needs you, fully awake, fully integrated, fully sovereign. This isn't about being special. It's about being real. And that changes everything. So if you're ready to stop performing, stop overgiving, and start embodying the kind of power Jung believed could shift humanity, then say it loud, say it proud in the comments, I stay sovereign. Because this work, it's not just about fixing your life. It's about becoming the kind of human who makes it safe for others to do the same. And if you're still with me now, I know you're that kind of human.